Got it.
Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. Appreciate you being here. And Rod and I have been enjoying some of the conversations in between these calls. So keep it up, reach out. And I'm going to be talking about a few added values, some values that you're getting regardless of your status. But we have in the annual member section now that you could actually schedule times with Rod or I and get some, real personal private time if you need that as an annual member. So just keep note of that. The other thing is, and hopefully people will hear this on the recording, is that, we want to bring value back to this group and give you opportunities to make money. We've added a commission portion on this. We've got a new corporate program that we're working with at Stillwater Christian School. And basically there's a flat rate for 5 students, which is $250. And then above that, they can add additional students for $10. So what that means is for members here, if you've got a company or a corporation that you feel we might be able to bring value to, then they could become a corporate client and you would receive a commission on that client as long as they're members. So, if you've got a company that signs up with a couple hundred employees, that's a pretty damn good extra added value for you. So keep that in mind. There is details on the website. It's the same place where the contest was at. So jump in there and keep an eye out. So it's just one way that we can bring some value to everybody. So thanks for that. All right. So tonight, it's kind of an interesting topic that Rod handed to me. It's in the Inspire core area, and it's basically about endurance, resilience, and maintenance. And I've got Rod said, well, maybe Jim will share a Baja story about his racing. And I've got so many, I had to think of a couple that made sense. But, what I want to talk about first is really the slow step to having endurance and resilience and strength, because business is a lot like this. Now, if you remember, I was a Spartan competitive racer in the United States. And I'd raced for almost 4 years competitively and enjoyed the process. And oftentimes you get in the middle of something, you forget how you got there until you decide you want to go back. So back in May, I went to my trainer and said, hey, I want to race the Spartan Ultra Series race, which is a 30-miler, which is actually this coming weekend in Lake Tahoe. And I want to get back on the program. So he says, okay, you realize that's a 24-hour race. I said, oh, I didn't realize that. But now that you told me, that's what I need to train for. So he sent me over my first training regimen. Okay, remember, I want to race at least 30 miles in 24 hours. You would think that first training regimen is going to be something pretty significant, right? Well, my running workout for that day, after spending 25 minutes in the gym, which was the required workout, was a 45-minute run, okay? 10 minutes at an easy pace, 10 minutes a little bit harder, 10 more minutes a little bit harder, and then cool back down for 15 minutes. Now, I read that, I thought, did he understand what I wanted to race? Because this is a pretty mild workout, and he had me doing that for 3 weeks. But you see what he knows, and I tend to have forgotten, is that it takes time and patience to build up that endurance and that strength and that resilience to what I was going to encounter in the race. And business is just like that. We've talked about this in the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate about building your values, building your mission statement, right? Building your business plan, and all those little foundational elements, which aren't very fun, because to me, running for 45 minutes at an easy pace and picking it up a little bit and then back down was not very exciting. It wasn't the wham I was looking for in my training. And we get that in business. We think, wow, I don't want to work on my mission statement or my business plan or these foundational elements. I want to get right to it. I want to make some money. But when we skip those important steps, we don't have the strength and the foundation to build the business that we're looking to acquire. Oftentimes we have these high hopes of doing something larger than life, and that's exactly where our minds should be. We shouldn't limit ourselves, but we also have to realize that there's a foundation to those limits so that they can't be broken. You don't get down the road, all of a sudden business starts to slow down. You've lost a little bit of your steam. It's like, wow, what happened to all my customers? Oh yeah, I veered left when I was supposed to be going right. And I think I gave an example of my wife's apparel business a couple of years ago. She started her apparel business because she was excited to have her voice in politics, and she had all these catchy lines, and I loved them. And she started this apparel line about 4 months into it. So she had a nice little pop when she launched, some friends and family support, a few new people, a gun show, made some money. But 4 months down the road, things started to slow down a little bit. It's like, Jim, I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden they're slowing down. I said, well, let's look at your website. Let's look at your mission statement. Let's look at your business plan. And we realized she was no longer females with a voice. She was men with an attitude. Black rifles matter, black and white shirts, all these cool things that resonated with me, but it was a complete disconnect with her. And it's because she got away from her foundational elements and those things that create that long-term success, just like a running program. So the second she flipped that back around, rebranded herself, built up a beautiful new website with her voice, her elements based on her original mission statement and business plan, she was back off to the races. And in this last year, she's had a ton of success. And now she's able to help others. So the point of all this is, as much as we want to do the fun stuff, right? Building endurance and strength takes time. Okay, it takes time. Once you get it, though, you'll have it and it won't go away. And that's where where the endurance comes in. Your business model has endurance for the long run. Now, this can also apply to our entrepreneurs. You're working for somebody else, look at the steps that it takes to get where you want to be successful, map it out and work the plan to get you there. Build relationships with your executives above you. They call that managing up. Do those things with them so that you can build your foundational elements and you have the endurance for the longevity, right? All right, so give you a Baja story because it's fun. I wish Wayne was here right now because Wayne is in that story. He knows it well because he was probably one of the main characters. Now, when I race cars, one of my, everybody just knew I was going to finish the race. It didn't matter. Even if we were last, we were going to finish every race. We did not quit. And oftentimes teams would, because it's an option. You break, you decide, am I going to fix that part? I'm going to get the grit to do it in the desert, with nothing but some baling wire and some duct tape. Well, I was fortunate enough to have the editor of Hot Rod Magazine in my race car with me. This was a vintage race. The stakes weren't as high as they were in our NASCAR style race trucks, but vintage race all the same. And we're still racers. We want to win. And we were going to do 175 miles together from the Bay of LA, which is on the east side of the Cape, over to the west side. It was a pretty good stint. And we were off and running. Things were going well, nice and fast. She was doing a good job. It's a female editor, by the way, doing her thing, and started burning oil. And, she's watching the gauges. Hey, you're burning oil. What do we got to do? So we pull over, and indeed, we were not only burning oil, we were leaking oil like a sieve. The motor had cracked, head had cracked, and we're just draining fluids. And she said, well, it looks like our race is over. In between all that, a couple stopped by in their Subaru in the middle of the desert from Canada, said, hey, you guys need any help? Nope, we're good. I was being the man. Nope, we're good. Keep going. And they sat across the dirt road taking photos. And I told the editor with me, I said, there is no way in hell that man in that Subaru from Canada is going to help me out. I'm too macho for that, right? Well, we tinkered around for an hour and realized we weren't going to be able to fix our problem on our own. I had to call them back over and ask for a tow out of the middle of the desert. So he got his revenge, and I got put in a hole. But the cool part about it was my mentality was never to give up. And I called the team on the sat phone, which was way outside of the desert. And I said, this is what's going on. Let's figure out a game plan when I get to the highway after I get towed out of this desert by a Subaru. So Alana, the editor, she thought, well, what are we going to do? I mean, your race is over. We still had 3 days left. Would have been great. We're doing really well. So it's not over till it's over. We have 3 days left. So we got to the highway and the guy said, look, we're going to tow this thing down to Laredo and a guy's going to meet us there and he's got a motor we could buy off him. We'll throw the motor and we'll get racing again tomorrow. We'll do it overnight. Sounds like a plan. So we get down to Laredo about midnight. The guys are going to work overnight in the parking lot. The guy with the motor never showed up. Imagine that. Well, the security guy says, hey, my dad's got a 1987 Chevy Silverado that's got the same motor you need if you want to buy that. So we said, all right, let's talk to him in the morning. So we wound up buying this 1987 Chevy Silverado, rented a local's, literally his garage, and swapped motors throughout the day and took a DNF on one day of the 5-day race. By that evening, the race car was up and running. We made 50 new local friends, ate clams and tacos and drank beer with them as we swapped these motors out. And the next day we raced again, and we raced again the 5th day to a 3rd place finish in the Baja 1000 vintage race. Now, it took a lot of resilience and endurance to stay up all night, do it again, swap the motors out, find the parts, make it work, and never quit. But the result of that was a team that felt like they had accomplished something significant. They made it through. We got to the finish line. We got to celebrate an official finish because, again, you can take a DNF day. And as a business, because racing is a business on the back end, that's how we get our sponsors. As a business, we earned 7 pages of recap history in Hot Rod Magazine. Now, if you don't know, Hot Rod Magazine charges $20,000 for a full-page article. We got 7 pages of free ad space because of that. There's a beautiful story written about how we were racing and wrecking a 1957 off-road race car. And she told the whole story about everything we did, right? We wouldn't have gotten the story. We wouldn't have gotten the finish. We wouldn't have got the memories that we received had we not had the endurance and the resilience to never quit and push through, right? When other teams were giving up, walking away, we were pushing through. And I promise you, in years to come, I've seen 2 other teams pull the same stunt that we did. And we'll all go down in history books for doing something crazy like buying a motor in a town and swapping it out to finish the race. So, when we talk about inspire, we inspired a lot of people to keep going. And when we look at our businesses, we should look at those opportunities to be able to swap the motor out and keep going, whatever that motor looks like. Have the endurance to keep going, pull the team together, find solutions, reach out to them, be resilient, and keep the business going. Now, maybe you're a new business and you're just getting started. You should build your business around those types of opportunities down the road. Have an open format for your team, your customers, your consumers, your partners to understand that we have a never quit attitude. That's how we're going to run this company. So in hard times, COVID, we just passed through that. We're not going to quit. We're going to find a way. Maybe we've got to make a hard left to survive it. We're going to get through it and come back the other side. I think a lot of companies have forgotten about that, what it takes to be that, right? So that's my story. That's how I tie it into business. But let me give you some real working notes as it relates to, I'm going to call it work ethic for tonight. We're talking about resilience, again, in the inspirational category. And a little acronym for you, which is HEAT, as it relates to work ethic. HEAT. First, hustle. That's the H. Get the job done on your own if needed, but pull together and get the job done through hustle. E, your ethics. Good people, work hard, have that ethic of hustling, right? The A, attitude. It's going to take a positive attitude to get the job done, to swap that motor out. You don't think anybody was complaining while we were swapping that motor out, right? They were laughing their asses off. They were getting dirty. They were shucking clams with the locals. I mean, it was a scene, right? But everybody was positive about it. So when you run into challenges with your team and business, be positive to get the job done, right? And then create an environment where your team can be teachable, where they're willing to learn and keep learning. And if that means learning on the top end as well, create that type of environment. So HEAT, hustle, ethics, attitude, and teachability, right? Give you another fun story because I got a whole bunch. This one's about my brother. And he's got a home out in Lake Havasu. Maybe some people might relate to the desert life. It was never for me, but I like to visit and enjoy the lake itself. My brother took over my dad's business. Well, my dad wasn't well enough to do it anymore. And it's a sign installation business. And when he came to me, he said, look, I'm thinking about taking over the business. What do you think? I don't know if I can make any money at it. And I analyzed it. I said, well, Scott, if you work hard, you can make a lot of money here, right? Because our dad was withering away in his health and he couldn't do the job that was needed. But I also knew some other things about Scott, what I'll talk about in a second. And so he said yes to my dad and he took over that business and he started installing signs. Now, these just aren't any signs like you see on the side of the road. My brother was installing real estate signs in one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. In other words, all those realtors had listings all day, every day that needed a sign in front of the house. And that sign had to go through rocks and hard desert ground that nobody wanted to dig except for my brother. And Will, Bruce, I know you and Will are two big guys. My brother's about your size, but his arms are about as big as my legs. And he digs those holes by hand. It's a big steel rod and digs those holes by hand all day, every day. And so what he proved in that business is that he'd get the job done. He built the reputation in town for getting that job done. The realtors called or faxed him orders every single day, and he got the job done. The other thing that I knew about Scott is that he has an amazing personality. People love him. They laugh with him. He tells jokes. He comes in with a smile, and he's a powerful person to get the job done. So I knew that if he employed those techniques in this business, that he would see success, right? And he was willing to do whatever it took. He always had a positive attitude. So I'll wrap that story up with saying Scott now is debt-free. He bought off his house. He owns all his cars. He's living the life that he wants. Yeah, he's got 15 to 20 years into this thing, but he's making a huge six-figure income with the sign business that he never thought he would make it off the ground. And really, in my mind, it comes down to his work ethic, his positive attitude, and his ability to use the HEAT acronym, right? So how do we build a team like that? What things do we remember when we're building a team like that? In my mind, you have to remember, everyone likes to be part of something that matters. Okay, if you're building a business or if you've got customers or partnerships or investors, people like to be a part of something that matters. It goes back to your mission statement or your original business plan. The messaging that you create there as foundational elements will help you entice people to be a part of something that's going to make a difference, right? Part of that is also, point 2, painting a vision for your company. Where's this company going? When Rod and I started the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate, we saw an opportunity that we can use our 50 plus years of combined experience. I think we said it was more like 80 of combined experience to make a difference in young people's lives and entrepreneurs at any age, because we paid a lot of that dummy tax, right? So painting a vision for our company was to help others succeed in what they're doing. Third point, really important one here. Lead from the front. Lead from the front. You need to be that person that's leading the charge. I like to go back to my restaurant experience and think about leading from the front, right? Showing people that you're willing to do the dirty job. How often have you seen somebody that works at a restaurant, they get out of their car, maybe they're on a smoke break, maybe their manager just getting to work, and they walk across the parking lot into the front door, and they stepped over a bunch of trash on the way there. They never picked it up. Why? Because they feel like maybe they're too good to pick up the trash. Maybe because that's not their trash. Maybe it's not even the restaurant trash. Who cares? Lead from the front. Pick up that trash. Let others around you see that you're willing to do anything that it takes to be a winner, to be the place that people expect to see. In this case, clean restaurant, right? Think about your own businesses or the companies that you work for. What leading in the front looks like, right? You should be that person. Others will follow. All right. Pay close attention to people. Pay close attention to people, right? Because what you observe about people, and I like to say, pick up on social cues or adjust your vibe to those people. That will help you not only build a solid team because you're in tune to them, you paid attention to them, but it'll allow you to, whether it be confront them, build them up, train them, guide them, or be that example for them. But understanding where they're coming from by paying attention to their social cues and their vibe, right? Paying close attention to people, very critical. As it relates to understanding people, a couple quick points in my experience. People have a need for certainty. They want to know that they're part of something, like I mentioned already, but that job is there, that you're there. They want some certainty in their life. Okay, that's part of building a solid team. Also, on the exact opposite, they like some uncertainty. They want to know that they're going to come into work or work your business, that there's an element of fun and surprise. So it's good to throw some uncertainty in there. And that could be as simple as, hey, Rod, by the way, great job today. I really appreciate what you're doing for me. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, I didn't expect that. So uncertainty can come in a manner of ways, but people like that. They like a little air of mystery. Okay. People have a need for significance. If they're willing to give you their time and commitment to your company, to your business, as a customer, a consumer, a partner, make sure that they feel significant for their contribution to your business. All right. People like to feel loved. Now, in business, you're not going to tell people you love them, but a different term for love is a connection to them. You can be gracious to them. You can be endearing to them. You can treat them with respect, just like you would somebody that you love, right? You can give them that true connection because that's going to keep them coming back. People also like growth. Okay, so as you're building your business, make sure that you entertain the growth factor. And finally, contribution. Allow people to contribute to what you're doing. That'll allow you to thrive, prosper. But going back to the purpose of this call is if people are contributing, it'll allow you to have that endurance and resilience in other ways that you might not have thought about. Okay, I'm going to give another story because I got one. And this is related to the endurance of being successful. All right. And I'll try to be brief with it because it's a long story. But back in my late teens, I was 18, right? Working for In-N-Out Burger. Actually, I was probably 17 at the time. I was making $3.95 an hour. That was the minimum wage at the time. I just saw Taco John's here in town, place I'd never go, is hiring at $18 an hour. So we've come a long ways. $3.95 an hour. Now, the reason why that's significant is because the manager of an In-N-Out Burger is bonused on top of his salary. He's bonused on the profitability of the store. In other words, at the end of the month, when the company calls the manager, he says, hey, you made an extra $20,000 in profit, sir. We're going to split that with you. And you've got $10,000 in profit to go in your pocket after you divvy some of that up to your team as bonuses, right? So you can imagine it's important to watch the bottom line. And that's where this story takes a twist as it relates to the endurance of company success. The owner of In-N-Out Burger came down to everybody and said, look, guys, our team is okay, but we can be better. Matter of fact, I want the best in the business. So what we're going to do is we're going to institute immediately a $6 minimum wage for everybody that wants to work for In-N-Out Burger. That's $2.05 more than the minimum wage that I was making. So that means the next day I showed up to work, I got an immediate raise of $2.05 an hour. Now you can imagine a manager thinking, wait, I get paid off profitability. You know, I'm spending beyond my means because we don't know how to manage our money. You're just taking a huge hit in my pocketbook, right? So there were some upset managers. But the owner of the company said, look, I know it's going to be hard. I know this is going to cost you a lot of money, but you're all here for the long haul. We've talked about this. We want the best people in the business. And the only way we're going to get the best is if we pay the best and we set our standards much higher than what we set them today. So we employed a bunch of tactics about what our expectations were of employees, what we invested in them, how we would grow them and build them up as a staff. And he promised the managers within a year that they would double their salaries, that they would have the best teams in the business, the best employees, and they never look back at the hit that they took that particular month. Now, at the time, store managers were making an average of $55,000 to $70,000 a year. And I think I'd heard a few kind of made closer to 80, 90. I think one individual was in that $90,000 range, right? Well, today, all these years later, In-N-Out is known as one of the top fast service restaurants in the country. They're worth over $20 billion with 30,000 plus employees, making more money than the average fast food worker is in the country, right? Most employees there have worked for many more years than the average place. Matter of fact, my brother who retired recently worked there 35 years. And it's not uncommon for people to have been there longer than he was. The average store manager at In-N-Out Burger today makes about $300,000. And that's all because the company believed in investing in the people and having the endurance to go the long distance on their employees and their people and their philosophies in business, right? So we can look at endurance a lot of ways as it relates to our business. But really what the lesson here is, build endurance as part of your business plan and how you look to the long run, right? Don't think about what's in front of you. Think about what's down the road, year 1, year 2, year 5, year 10, year 20. What does that look like? And aim for the stars on that. All right. I'm going to end this with an Andy Frisella blog because I usually start it with an Andy Frisella blog. Some might appreciate this, some of our veterans. And so it goes like this. Every day is another battle. Everyone will tell you they want to be successful, but very few of these people will actually show you they want to be successful through their actions. You can say you're all in. You can think you're ready for war, but 1 or 2 small victories won't win the war. The war is won through the habit of showing up every day and winning the daily battles with yourself. This is something that all truly successful people understand very well. Every day is another battle to win. Don't be the person who gets a few wins, begins to think you've won the war. Develop the habit of winning every single day. And yes, that includes weekends. If you commit yourself to that and win the daily battles, regardless of the obstacles in your way, the war will take care of itself. And just from personal experience, that's the life that I was living during COVID. Everybody was battling that war, but I was just attacking every day as I had before. And I had some of the most successful years in business during COVID. So the war is won every single day. All right, I'm going to open up to some questions. Rod, I know you got something.
Well, I'm going to jump in right away, and it's not just questions. Number one, you started jumping into my next week's lesson, which is on coaching, and it's on work ethic. So you teed me up there, but believe me, I've got plenty more to say, and I've got my own stories. I want to say, Jim, thanks. Number one, your stories really illustrate, what you're talking about here. And I have always been a fan in every business of team building. And that started even before the military, your life depends on it, in the military. And so, and I know Mr. Cartwright, you as well in law enforcement, and Jim, your father, your life depends on your team. And, out in the oil fields, Palin, I know you've got a dangerous job too. If you're still out there working on crews sometimes. My son did that. And, you rely on your team. They become part of your family. And I just wanted to say, Jim, that it's important to build that team because most people are spending more waking hours with their work team than they do with their family. And I don't know if that's scary or if it's just the way it is, but when you put it in terms like that, you better be doing something right. And the first thing is you better appreciate them. And on these calls before, I know I've mentioned it, that the number one reason people quit their jobs or leave a job that they had, why I used to steal employees from other companies. I looked for those good employees. Why did they leave? Because they felt unappreciated at their current job. They may have been making all the money, they may have had everything, but if they didn't feel appreciated, I could steal them. That's just the way the business world works. But I want to go back to your story with the off-roading, because there were some great things in there that, and you can expound on these too, Jim. I'll ask him in terms of a question, but what was the importance of being humble, asking for help, and your team knowing what the mission was? Those are the three top takeaways from that story, and it's just imperative, I think. So if you'd speak to that a little bit.
Well, I don't know where I got it from. I think it's with Baja racing in general, because it's your first battle is against the elements, right? You're not going to beat anybody if the terrain takes you out, right? So you go into that type of racing, and this is top level racing. I mean, a lot of those guys have $1 million programs. This isn't backyard junkies, You go into it thinking, hey, we're gonna help anybody that's out there stuck by themselves, right? But along with that notion, it's like, look, if I can help somebody get out of a hole and allow them to keep going, why wouldn't I help myself to get out of the same hole and keep going, right? Not to mention, it's a hell of a lot more fun to get through a problem and come out on the other side, right? Regardless if we made it to the finish line, we have campfire stories for the rest of our lives. Remember that one time. And the importance of that, and this is one thing that I did realize and understand when I built the team out. The importance of that is it builds camaraderie, right? It builds camaraderie, just like when you're in that foxhole, that you can get through things together. And maybe in particular occasions, you just don't have the tools to finish, but on other times, you pull together and you do finish. And business is so much like that. And that's what I love about it, is because if we can pull together, we can get through a tough time or a slow night at work or whatever it might be. But building that camaraderie is so important to endurance, because without your team, you're not going to get it done. So Rod, thanks for observing that, because all those three things did culminate. And by the way, I appreciate you understanding that the team knew the task, right? Because we'd already developed a mission statement for the team. We never quit. The only reason why we would ever stop racing is if the buzzer rang. In other words, when the race is officially over, we would quit. And I'll tell you, one time we didn't quit, even though the buzzer rang. We were racing the Baja 1000, and we were about, I would say it's probably 200 miles from the finish line, and the buzzer was going to ring. And it was in the middle of the night in very dangerous territory. And I pulled into a side road where the team was waiting for me to load me up on the trailer. And I was sitting there, and they said, hey, I just got a call on the sat phone from the race organizer. They want to know what you're doing. And they told them, of course, I was getting ready to trailer it up because I wouldn't be able to make it in. And they said, we need you to keep going. There's a paraplegic driver in a side-by-side in front of us in the middle of nowhere, heading for the finish line. And the only thing that's kept him going is knowing that you're out there with him. Okay. So even when we were supposed to quit, we didn't quit to give this guy hope to finish. And both of us came in, I think it was like 8 hours after the official finish, in the dark, to a faux finish line that the local people had put up in the city of Ensenada, waiting for us to come in. And by the way, we got more press for finishing 8 hours after the official finish than most of the finishers, right? So sometimes you never quit until it's over. Palin, got anything?
Did you let him win?
Yeah, right. Bruce, we got a light crew tonight. Usually we'll have a dozen people here, but if you had any questions about business, this is kind of the time that you can ask anything about your business. Doesn't have to be related to the topic or something you're working on. Rod or I are happy to answer. And what that does for the rest of the group, just for future reference, is your questions might apply to somebody else, and it allows us to talk about it in an open forum to maybe pull something out of there. So, Palin, I don't know if that was just a thumbs up or you had something to say.
Oh, it's thumbs up. Good story. Like it.
Yeah. Well, I know you're not a never quit guy, right? I've seen you out there and
I
uh,
know.
you get out there and get the job done. By the way, Palin, I started 75 hard today. You're only the
Did you?
second person that knows that, although I'm almost done with my day. So looks like you better get real serious about starting something.
I'm getting real serious about it. It's in my head how this can play out, how I can make this work. So
Yeah. Well, as my wife said last night, she said, "Honey, just start tomorrow and stop talking about it." So, how do you say no to that, right? Got up this morning, I got in the gym, and I'll tell you guys about it in 75 days. So,
that's pretty much a sign to get after it. So
right, right. Okay, Rod, if you got any more questions or Bruce, let me know. Otherwise, yep. Go ahead, Bruce. Let me unmute you. There's a mute button on the bottom right. There you go.
How's that?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. How often do you guys review your business plans?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because they do require a review, and I think really on a quarterly basis, if you have partners, it's good to look at it quarterly and just say, hey, we're on the right track. If you don't have partners, you're probably thinking about it more often than you like to admit because you're always going, okay. But, dig in. It doesn't have to be a long thing. It could be 10 minutes. Just read through it. Make sure that you're following what you originally set out to do. And if you say, look, we're in a different path, but we're seeing success, then update the business plan to integrate the new success, right? Because really it's like a map. You've got your map moving forward, you're following the trail. All of a sudden you found a better trail. Maybe it's a little bit faster, it's a little bit sturdier. Well, it's okay to update that, right? But it is good to go back. I would say quarterly if you have partners. If you're a big corporation, I would say semi-annually. If you got 25 or more employees, because then it just becomes too cumbersome. And then you can put all kinds of tactics into people giving suggestions to update that business plan, right?
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So quarterly, I'll take that. That makes a lot of sense. Because one of the things we used to do was stuff called after action reports. Whenever you did something, you went through it, what you do right, what you do wrong, and you almost have to yank your ego out of it. Or have a thick skin because there's stuff, in law enforcement, you always did stuff and it could have been done better. And so how do you, learn from that? And I'm telling you, a lot of outfits don't want to do that. And I think it's been my experience, the more that you do, the better I tend to do with stuff. And I'm trying to apply that more to businesses. I mean, that's sort of the reason why Will's doing the podcast. We're getting that up and running and we're starting to set goals and what are we doing here? And actually have concrete goals and we're going to go do this. We need 8 podcasts. Okay, well, we need a disclaimer. Well, then, quite frankly, get off your butt and record it and drive on.
That's right.
And it may not be perfect, but a good product is better than a perfect product tomorrow.
That's right. So, and you've got to be good before you can be great. And, this opens up a really good dialogue, Bruce, because oftentimes, when I look at a business, and this is true for your business as well, because I've been through your website a few times recently, and I understand the podcast and I know what you do and what you stand for. And I also know what you do in the political arena, right? Oftentimes a business is like an octopus. They used to call Jimmy Buffett, he was the octopus, right? He was the head, and all Jimmy Buffett's businesses were his tentacles, okay? Which, he had his Margaritaville restaurants, Margaritaville tequila, blenders, he had resorts, he had all these things, his music. Oftentimes we start going down a road and you think, hey, this is my core business. The reality is that might be a tentacle of something much larger yet to be discovered. And your business plan might take on a whole new life of its own because you're like, you know what? I love this podcast thing, but I'm better. This is a better business for here. And that becomes a supporting mechanism. Right.
Okay.
So it is good to review them, especially in your infancy, right? So you guys are doing your podcast right now. Now I talked to Will before you launched in the early phases of what he wanted to do. And then you morphed into what you are today, which I find very entertaining. And who knows where that's going to go, right? So as a business model, it might change because you might say, we're getting more listenership when we talk about this. and we're equally excited about that topic. So we got to make a little turn, right? Then all of a sudden, who knows, your tactical business might take off. Maybe it's on the back burner, but then all of a sudden it takes off because of your podcast, right? So we've got to ebb and flow, be willing to make changes and evaluate where we're at within our overall plan and rewrite if necessary. So it's great discussion. I love looking at how businesses can morph. And when you start looking at other opportunities for revenue, right? It's just like when we saw you at the gun show, hey, go grab some business cards from these guys, because they could be either podcast listeners, okay, which would be good. They could be people interested in your tactical training, which would be better because they pay for that. But what if they were interested in being a sponsor of your podcast? Boom. All of a sudden, you've got another source of revenue, right?
Well,
And
and it's interesting you mention that, Jim, because you have to have it. Like one of my training agent talked about being semper gumby, always flexible. So we just did a sporting clay shoot for the Lake County Republicans. And one of the things that one of the guys there, we're doing it for a fundraiser. And one of the guys there had been I don't know if he was a professional fundraiser, but he had way, way more experience than us. And he was very gentlemanly, very nice. And he said, you know what, dude, you guys are leaving money on the table. You had 10 stations and you didn't have one sign up or have anybody sponsor. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, there's people out in the community that want to sponsor this stuff, that will give you money to be a sponsor. And you go to the local sign shop and spend $12 for $100, sponsorship, and you can put a sign up. And I'm like, holy crap, dude, I didn't know that. So the hunt now in that arena is, we've got 10 stations for this next year. I want a minimum of 10 sponsors.
that's
You know
right.
what? And it just takes some hustle and some time, but never thought about that.
Well, I'll give us a little plug here in the syndicate. When the more we know, the more value we can bring, right? I can't say I would have come up with that idea right off the top of my head because I wasn't there. But I've been to a lot of golf tournaments. Every single one of those 18 holes has a sign on it that says sponsored by, right? And I'll tell you right now, Bruce, if you guys open that up, we want to sponsor a hole next year. And when I say
right.
we, it's probably going to be Liberty or lose. But there's so many opportunities to have extensions of your business, right? And that again is where we can generate a lot of value, whether that's coming directly from Rod or I, or some of the other members on the calls, right? We also have on the back end of this, there's a membership directory where you can reach out to people. It's not to get pushy sales, but you can reach out and say, hey, what do you think? This is what I'm struggling with, and start to build a network amongst each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's a good thing.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So
I wanted to chime in on this real quick too, Jim, with reviewing the business plan. It shouldn't, if your mission statement is keeping you focused, you shouldn't have to rewrite a whole plan. It's like you said, you can add on, and follow the money, follow, wherever you get traction is where you want to go, right? But you don't have to micromanage that through a business plan. You need to be aware of it, and I think you can improve. If you find a way, again, Bruce, you said best practices, and I get that, or you said after actions reports. To me, after actions reports get you to best practices.
mm-hmm.
But best practices should be something that you do, not necessarily something you have to micromanage in a business plan. So just know that the people you hire, the people that you work for, should know what those best practices are, without it having to be written out, in the business plan. So don't get bogged down with details. Keep that flexible. That's how you're going to maintain that flexibility. Someone might best your best practice, with a new idea. So just keep it general and more flexible, I think. And the second thing that this brought up is the difference between marketing and advertising. And in both cases, you need to be consistent. It's consistency that's going to get this done, and that's part of what you're talking about in your, endurance and resilience, is consistency. And that's what is going to take that time. That's what you have to be committed to. So even in advertising, you might get the quick payoff as opposed to marketing, which is brand building, right? But even with advertising, it's still TOMA. How many times have we heard that? Top of mind awareness. You have to have your name out there, so it's not always about product, price, and promotion. It's just about name recognition sometimes. So you just have to be consistent and go with it. And that should be part of your business plan, that consistency.
Great points.
Yeah. Hey, Bruce, I'll throw a little nugget out at you. I'm not sure if I spoke to Will about this on when we talked about the podcast foundation and that original plan. I was successful. I had a podcast called Baja, and it was all about traveling down to Baja and, what you'd experience and hotels and food and all that stuff. So it was very niche, right? Now, what you're doing in your podcast has a niche audience as well. Within that audience, it's much easier for you to go to advertisers and sell them on a very specific audience, right? So when you look at my main show, the answer is yes. I interview people from across the country on a variety of topics. And to find a sponsor that is going to say, you're spot on target for me is going to be tough. So what I have to do is show them the numbers to receive the amount of money that I think it's worth, right? And I know we're not there yet on numbers. And even though we have 63,000 subscribers, the numbers aren't there yet to make some good money. But the Baja show, because it was very specific, I was able to demand $100 a show in ad space. And that was a 20-second commercial that I recorded with my voice. So it sounded very authentic. And I got to slide it in the show wherever I wanted to. And the reason why it was worth $100 to them is because it was their exact target audience. They sold Baja insurance. If you're going to Baja, you're going to want insurance. Now, when I think about you, the show that sticks in my mind was the 22LR, right? That's an opportunity that you could, in the future, based on the topic, you could go to a bullet manufacturer and say, look, I'm doing a show on bullet size or, whatever that is, and say, look, we've got a sponsorship position for $100 or $50 for the show. If you want it, it's yours. Or maybe it's the local gun store that sells ammo, right? Be very specific and say, every person that's listening to my show is a potential customer of yours. And then you don't have to prove the numbers as much as you do the audience, and you already have the audience. So think about that as you grow, because you're going to nail their target every time. As somebody that used to buy ad space, it was a numbers game. Yeah, if I bought 100,000 followers, I know 10% of them will probably buy my product, and that's worth X amount of dollars, right? Numbers are much smaller than that in terms of what I would get. In your case, 100% of your listeners are gun enthusiasts, and you nailed it every time. So a little extra food for thought there. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Phelan, if you got nothing, we're going to wrap it up. Rod, do you want to talk about what you're talking about next week? I know we touched on it.
Yeah, touched on it. I can tell you that I've always been a fan, literally a fan of hard work. I like work. There's satisfaction in work. And next week is coaching on work ethic. So you did a talk a while back on getting off your butts, right? And that was getting off. Well, I would do that, but I like to get off your butt also. I think there's value in that. So I'll be talking about that next week and giving some of my own stories as well. So great talk tonight, Jim. Good inspiration, good content as always. And the other thing with consistency, Jim and I, just those of you who are out here, Jim and I were looking at the numbers of people who actually watch these afterward. And it's amazing how many people are tuning in afterward. If they can't make it tonight or they can't make our Tuesday show, how many people are actually watching it. So it's important to be consistent, even if you don't see that right in front of you. It's there. So again, good job, Jim. Thanks.
Cool.
Yep. Appreciate it. Now, just as a reminder, as I wrap this up, these discussions are pieces of the puzzle to create the whole, right? And what we're talking about is the whole business structure, or the whole opportunity that you can take advantage of, or that next direction in the company you're working for, right? So as you start to put these pieces together, we've talked about values and mission statement, personality assessments, right? So if you're new to this group, these are pieces of the puzzle that create the whole. And going back and watching some of those older videos, there's a lot of value in that. You might not want to watch them all at once, but if you got an extra 20, 30 minutes to kill, they're good to have. And I know that there's some value in the Q&A sessions of those calls. So I hope everybody's inspired and ready to get after it this week. And we look forward to your call next week, Rod. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
All right.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Thanks.